Kaula Makamandela.
Bakona bangelangiti abasibona sesikhululekile
Sesikhululekile
uthi not yet too 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 not yet too
Good afternoon and welcome to Calvin on Athol Church. We are on our final episode of our story. Bamkos, it's been, is it 6 or 8 weeks? It's been 8 weeks. 8 weeks. It's been a very good 8 weeks of discussions. Now, today I wanted us to start our discussion with this line. I remember, in fact, you were my English teacher at high school at Bethel College, and we did a book called Julius Caesar. I think it was Act 1, Scene 3, where Cassius was trying to influence Brutus. Mm-hmm. And he says one of the famous lines, which I still remember up to this day, it says that the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. Mm-hmm. After having looked through the history of Bamkos, I'm tempted to believe that truly the fault is really not in our stars, but in ourselves. What's your take?
I think we need to arrive at that, what would we call it, a subjective climax, where we realize that what has happened to us was externally influenced, but was internally affirmed. We are victims of our own making.
Yes.
I don't think we have time now to be blaming missionaries and so on. They can stay the way they are, but in a country as free as South Africa is, which is also part of the international community, we can no longer be lambasting the missionaries.
Yes.
We need to start saying, Mhlolu sekhaya.
Yes, yes. Now, on that subject, Bamkos, we obviously know that the legacy of the missionaries was not very good. However, we've had quite a lot of time on our own to correct some of those things.
Certainly.
And unfortunately, what has happened is that we've actually continued on the same trajectory which the missionaries left, if not worse off, actually. We've actually made a downward turn, actually.
Yeah, we declined.
Yes. Now, today, Bamkos, I want us to focus on some of the major issues. I see you're wearing your master guide Pathfinder search. Yes, this is the original one. I see.
Yes.
Even the I think I have the same thing also. I think mine is like this too.
Yes.
Yes. It's an old one. Now, Bamkos, the good thing about the Adventist Church is that we are a learning church. Okay, let me say, we are supposed to be a learning church.
Certainly.
Which means that we actually have an opportunity to correct, self-correct, and make sure that we change direction if things are not going okay. However, it seems to me that the only group of people who are doing any kind of thinking is probably somewhere up there at the GC, and at local conference level, even at union and division, there's no thinking at all. It's just implementation. Is
Yeah.
that a true reflection?
It could be to a certain extent, to a large extent. I think it depends on the levels at which people are. For instance, the division releases a lot of literature.
Yes.
But the union occasionally, but the conferences are busy obeying the guys from above, sucking stuff from above, some of which is totally irrelevant to what happens. In fact, there's no publishing at the conference levels. They are rubber stamping what comes from the union. Some of it is not even carried out. You attend workshops where things are introduced, but they are never followed by the local pastor and the local elders.
Yes.
Yeah.
But is there any publishing happening at division level?
They do publish. They do publish quite a lot.
Okay.
But I have been critiquing their material in the last 6 months, and I've discovered that because of certain issues I can't raise now,
Yes.
they are dealing with the old church and not with the new church. They're speaking to my age, not your group, and not your kids. Yeah. The result is that some of their material is good promotional stuff that merely affirms what we grew up knowing, but they are not paving any new path. There could be other reasons, of course, because the local division is staffed by persons largely who are not South African by origin.
Yes.
So they have your follow the leader type of thinking. They don't want to disturb the cart.
And question anything.
And yeah, they don't want to rattle the boat and so on, yes. So this is one of our challenges. I think what we need now is for churches to become more autonomous than they have been. Churches are very dependent on the office. And when nothing comes from the side of the office, nothing happens. And this is frustrating your age group and those who are younger.
Sure. Babungos, now let's come to a union level. Is
Okay.
there any publishing happening there?
They release a magazine once a month or twice a month. I don't know. What's the name of that thing? I don't, yeah. They are supervising board primarily. They're supervising churches, supervising the conferences, taking care of Helderberg, and primarily that's all. And of course checking if there are any, nothing goes wrong. For instance, you can't publish a book and have it endorsed at the union. They've got a book review committee. They go through the stuff, and if they think it's not kosher, they throw it out. My books, for instance, are not wanted at the union because they question the system.
Now, can I ask a question, Babungos? So who sits within this review committee?
Is the publishing department and other people. I don't want to mention names.
Okay.
They might think we're scandalizing them. Okay. But the union is a censoring body right now, because they want to get accolades from the GC and the division. They will never allow anything that critiques them. Not at all.
Do we still have a publishing house in South Africa currently?
I'm not so
Which
sure.
is church owned by the church?
I suspect only the Voice of Prophecy is publishing. I don't know if they're releasing any books.
The Sentinel Publishing House?
No, Sentinel, the name no longer works. Southern Publishing was shut down. Publishing was sent to the union, but it looks like they publish stuff that has to go to churches. They reprint material from the General Conference. And,
So it's not publishing, it's really reprinting.
to a large extent. And I don't think they've got a core of writers that they depend on.
Now, this really is actually going to the core of what I want to talk about in terms of saying, are you saying, therefore, that the culture of creative writing, culture of original writing, so that by people who actually are experiencing the Adventism as it happens within the context of South Africa or Southern Africa, is not there anymore?
No, it's non-existent. It has never been allowed. In fact, this morning I was thinking of the case of that book you said could not be published. And I think we need to go back to that story at some other time.
Yes.
Let me tell you something. The structure of the church is such that the further you are from the General Conference, the more dependent you are on those who are above you. So we cannot have a new dimension here, new initiatives in this union, unless they are consistent with what Ted Wilson and his team would want to endorse.
But that's anti what Adventism is all about. Isn't Adventism founded on a local church principle first as the superior body?
In theory, but not in practice. And not in you can see this in the way Maponga is being handled. It's not being handled by a local church. It's being handled by a conference. It's not even being handled by the district director. A conference is worried about Maponga. What do they? He has never talked about Adventism. Why do they want to do what they might be intending to do? That's a classical example of where the system is failing us.
Yes.
What if he had put these things in a book? They would not have reacted the way they're reacting now. They are reacting because it went into the public media.
So in other words, you're saying, therefore, that our system of governance, therefore, is no longer that Presbyterian / combo material. It's much more like an orthodox system, which is what, for example, the Roman Catholic Church practices.
Primarily, let me tell you something. We have been infiltrated. We've been infiltrated either by personalities or by a certain influence. From my own knowledge, which I can't divulge now, we are closely guarded.
Now, Bamgos, we have a very good structure from a learning point of view in our youth department.
Fine.
Which is the Pathfinder clubs. On its own, it really looks impressive because it actually takes care of the needs from the young age right all the way up to adulthood. Now, the challenge, therefore, I'm posing to you, though, is that is it serving us as it's supposed to be?
It has the capacity to serve us. What I think we need to do is to talk into these structures. I'm beginning to think that the Sabbath school department should be linked to the youth department. Because both are teaching departments.
Yes.
At the, let's say, primary school level. They should be, you see, the youth department should confirm what is being taught in the Sabbath school department. And the Sabbath school department should also confirm what is being taught there. If the two programs were to be aligned, you would not see this schism, where people come in the morning and they're out they're not there in the afternoon. The question is, who does the church take care of in the afternoon? And that's why I see all these entertainment-oriented programs, some of which have nothing to do with the status of Adventism, its mission, and impact on lives. My broad proposal would be that in the absence of Adventist institutions, every church should now be mandated to run a school-based curriculum in the afternoon, on Sabbath, and on Sunday for half the day.
But Bamgos, before you actually you need to have a good curriculum in the first place.
Secondly.
Also, you need to have people who will be able to deliver that curriculum. Do we have any of the two?
I think we have the potential. There's enough educated persons in this church to commit themselves to that. What we need to do now is to reorient them, because I've read stuff that has been produced by people in STASA, the union, and so on, and I discover a lot of it is classically academic, but is not Adventist oriented. It does not develop one into an efficient Adventist. It's merely you are talking to any citizen of the country. And I think the death of Adventist education in the church in South Africa, particularly the Black Church, has destroyed the ethos of what it means to be an Adventist thinker, an academic.
Okay. And that thinking
almost to the extent that some of our academics who despise Adventist schools.
Now, because you see, one of the critical problems we have, for example, I know within the Calvin and Athol Church, is the fact that we are experiencing a bit of what is called cognitive dissonance between what we are offering and what our kids are expecting and
what they're
experiencing. And what they're experiencing.
It's a fact.
Now, I took some time to go through some of the curriculums, for example, right from Sunbeam all the way up. And there's some great things in there.
Certainly.
There's some great things in there. But there are also some archaic old things in there also.
It's a fact. It's a fact. Some of it might not be archaic. It just is irrelevant for Africa.
Now,
And there's an assumption at the General Conference that
Yes.
we're all at the same developmental level.
Yes.
They don't know what the missionaries did here. Or they know, but they're assuming that these wrongs will right themselves through some spontaneous generational
Yes.
process. But we need a core of black people and pastors who will say, let's start the black church from scratch.
Now, you are actually raising a very fundamental point here, because the assumption you're talking about, I saw that in all of the material, because they leave a lot of leeway to the local conference
Yes.
to develop. For example, let me just take one thing which I know a lot of people love, drilling. You know, if you are someone from Mars and coming into the Adventist church, you'd believe that drilling is something which is in the Bible, that it's got to be done the way it's done and the way it's so enforced. But I was shocked to find out that it's actually an optional thing.
It's a fact. Our leaders don't study what the originators of these programs say.
Exactly.
And the options and so on. They also don't contextualize these things. You know there are vocational honors that are relevant to South Africa.
Yes. And well, I wanted to talk more about also I just started with drilling because you know there's a case in point. For example, I mean the Dube kids, they were doing very, very good drills, but which in a form of a dance.
Okay.
To obviously some very good Pathfinder leaders found it very offensive and un-Adventist.
Mandla, didn't our people drill?
Well, that's my whole point.
Before 1652, didn't they drill? They drilled as they danced differently.
Yes.
There are different forms of drilling, not the military static drilling
Yes.
of your Caucasian communities. And these things, I mean, we don't have a concept of drilling in Africa. The concept is
movement.
Movement,
It's all
yes.
about movement. You see, again, the main aim is movement
Certainly.
in a cohesive manner. That's what it's supposed to be. So it can be actually done within the Caucasian point of view through drilling, but it's not the only way to do it.
Let me tell you why it is like that.
Yes.
Africans believe in a unified universe.
Yes.
Their epistemology says all things are interrelated. Yes. Therefore, I can't drill as an isolated item.
Yes.
And become an expert in drilling. I need to relate it to how my life lives.
Yes.
You get the point? And you see it in the way we built our own dwellings. African architecture is primarily secular. Because it comes from a secular view of life, an inclusive view of life. Yes. Which is why, from another point, we never had things like flu. Because you can't have a flu when you live inside a rondavel. Because the convectional processes there of air are even, go to your home right now. The kitchen is warm, very hot.
Yes.
The rooms next to the kitchen might be warm. What about the far off bedroom?
It's cold, yes.
African architecture did not have these various climatic conditions. I know I'm using a major term now,
yes.
but the temperatures in our houses are varied because of the structure of Western architecture. You get the point? It is multi-cornered. Multi-cornered. On another point, which you talked about earlier, about the curriculum. Imagine you having about 10 or 12 young people. Let's say, go to your kitchen at home. List me all the things that you see there. Everything from the cupboard, everything, whether it is liquid, powder, metal, whatever, or oil, list it.
Yes.
By the time they're done, you have a laboratory. We don't need a laboratory in the science block at school. And yet there's a laboratory in the house. And we don't see that the kitchen is a lab. There are detergents there, there's stuff to clean, there's stuff to kill cockroaches. There's all sorts of chemicals in the kitchen.
You know, because about 3 years ago, Makuel and I attended a function sponsored by Audi where Siya Xuza. Siya Xuza is one South African brilliant young man from Mthatha, who for the first time saw an aeroplane in 1994 around his area, when it was dropping off the pamphlets.
Pamphlets.
And he decided, actually want to do that. And by the time he was 10, he had blown his mother's kitchen concoction, mixing things. And right now, as we know, I don't know if you know, there's a planet called the Kulza planet, because he's discovered some planet. He is a celebrated astronomer right now, obviously having studied at Harvard. But you're right, it started right there in his mother's kitchen.
Wow.
That's where it started. I mean, C.R. Kulza, I don't know if a lot of people know about him, but that's exactly what he's done.
You know, man, as you speak, we've deprived our children the opportunity to be creative and to invent things. Yeah. I mean, when you think of what our forefathers did, you can see that there's been a decline in creativity.
Yes.
Go to the pyramids, go to the sphinxes, go to the... I mean, why did they go for the Rondavelle in the first place? Why did they go for the Rondavelle? I'm not talking about these shacks that you see now in the townships. That's nonsense. That's degradation. I'm talking about the original Rondavelle, built by a community, built by the African Kraal, for instance, in which the householder resides at the center and so on. All that, to me, reflects the universe, the solar system. The main house is the sun. And it's controlling the satellites, the moon and the planets around itself. African people designed their homestead on the basis of the universe.
You know, talking about that, I know we're digressing a bit. You know, I don't know if you know much about the Great Wall of Benin.
Okay.
Now, the Great Wall of Benin is actually 8 times bigger than the Great Wall of China.
You can't say it.
8 times bigger, yes, than the Wall of China. Guess what? No one has heard of it. Do you know that that Wall of Benin, for example, was destroyed in 1878 by the British when they attacked the city of Benin, and they made sure that they destroyed, but they couldn't destroy it because it's still there now. Can you imagine something which they say that the Wall of China, you can actually see it from
space, yes.
Space. But yet they have not seen the Wall of Benin from space, which is 4 times bigger than the Wall of China.
How come?
It's very interesting. Anyway, now that let's come back to this. So Bamgosi, my issue here is this, is that having looked at the curriculum, for example, all the things like those honors, etc., for example, which we teach our kids, you're right. I find them, a lot of them, irrelevant to them right now. How we also teach our kids is also a challenge to them. I mean, I knew, for example, with my kids, when they went to school, they started using these iPads and all the computers, etc. Yes. And then on Sabbath, you want them to go find a piece of paper somewhere, and you think they'll be interested in that. How do you bridge this gap, Babugos? Why is it that, for example, no one, let's say within our local conference, has said, look, let's really look at the curriculum. Let's see what are those things we can actually innovate on. Start teaching our kids, for example, 4IR things, robotics, things which will make sure that it positions them, as a progressive citizen in the future. Just like, for example, those honors did probably like 60, 70 years ago. Why have we stopped thinking, and we're still thinking like 60 years ago?
Let me tell you something that I did in the Zola church some years ago. I got all your teens out of church during the service. I designed material for them. And I downgraded what I'd learned when we were in matric to your standard 6 group. Some of which I learned at college, I gave it to them because they are in another time space, another epistemological space, where they are able to grapple with things in matric that you and I met in matric, which they can tackle with a standard 6 mind.
Absolutely.
Because of the growth of knowledge and technology in the world. I have a problem with Adventism. They think that they must always be teaching us primary school stories, even when we are old. Because they are running a rusted model of human development. They know we're growing, but they are not advancing the program the way it should. Here's another conflict. Your local church teachers, or I'm talking about church-based teachers, I'm talking about school-based teachers and leaders, take GC material and fail to contextualize it.
Yes.
They fail to let it speak an African idiom, either methodologically or conceptually. The result is that we now have a confused youth department, and of course the education system is tattered, does not exist, and a church that simply goes to church and nowhere else. We are stuck. We're stuck. If I were to be rough, I would say we need to start from scratch. But people say, what's that now? Starting from scratch. But basically, I think we're making observations that should go into some assessment council or seminar where we say, fine, the missionaries did their work. We can't depend on them. I have a text this thick on denominational history that is used in Korea by the group that goes there to teach as missionaries.
On denominational history?
Yeah, I got it from a lady in Soweto. I looked at it and I said, it was designed at Oakwood. Designed at Oakwood. I'm quite appreciative of what they did, even though I query the approach. I think it suits America, it does not suit us here.
Yes.
So what we need to do now is to form clones of writers, subject authors, and curriculum developers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, policy allows that.
Well, actually, funny enough, you say that. For example, let's talk about denominational history. Let's talk maybe about the Master Guide program, for example, which is one of our senior programs. For example, it says that denominational history, they don't prescribe books. They do have a few books which they've prescribed.
Yes.
But they then say the local church can also do that, prescribe some books which they think are relevant. Why is it that there has been any book, for example, by local authors? I mean, Alvin Macapela's book has been now in circulation for what, over 20 years?
Yeah, I produced it in 1996.
Yeah, over 20 years.
Yeah.
Why is it that it has not made it, for example, as part of the denominational history?
Adventism globally is afraid of internal critique. But in South Africa, internal critique can only be done by whites and not blacks. When you critique the church as a black man, you are a ruffian, you are a rebel, you need to be censored. Black Adventist pastors in this country I follow the leader type. Not all of them.
Yes.
But they've not been given the space to create. I was reading 2 doctoral theses at home this week, produced by pastors in this conference. And my mind says, what's wrong with them? One started another movement, which is not the Adventist movement, and I said, I don't want to call the name. And I said, where is this doctorate in the church? One studied stuff that is relevant to this department, but is not using it. Not using that material.
So you're saying that they just study so
they're studying for certification.
For certification,
for
but
salaries,
they don't apply
for titles.
that.
They don't apply, yes. It's what I think we need to unlock is the way the structure looks at its members. Members are not subjects or objects of development. They are objects of support, of dependence. Depend on us. We create a dependent church here. The question is, where did you get it from? Does the pastor know? Did the president sanction it? We're very hierarchical and oppressive and colonial. If the president does not know it, does not endorse it, it will not fly.
But that's against our stated polity as a church.
No, the problem is that there are 2 churches in South Africa. There is the international church and the colonized church. Both coexist here. And those who made us who or what we are don't have the means to relieve us of this burden. And we are refusing to be relieved of the burden, unfortunately, because we think this thing is sacred. It comes from a holy place called the General Conference. I was having a discussion with a friend of mine some years ago, and we made a very funny analogy about something else. I'll say it to you here. Somebody said, we were talking about who elects where.
Yes.
Somebody said, well, God elects at the General Conference. The angels elected at the division. Human beings elected the at the union, and demons elect at the conference level.
What about local church then?
I don't know. Perhaps the devil sends his lowest angel to fiddle with us. But that model was basically saying, it looks like there's a descending order of decline rather than ascending order of decline. Things come from the GC pure. If I can show you the amount of documents I have from the GC, and you compare them with what they're doing here, you'll suspect we're running two churches.
Well, that's exactly my point, because when I went through the manuals, the Adventist manual, I was actually shocked, because I thought some of these things are actually maybe statute, so to speak.
No.
You can't change them. But I found that there's so much leeway. Why are we not, therefore, making sure that we tailor some of these great programs, by the way, into the local context? Why are we afraid of localizing and customizing Adventism to reflect who we are?
Let me tell you something, man. This week I was looking at the list of names of pastors I've known, pastors I knew from childhood, and their pictures and so on, and I came to the conclusion that we need to give birth to a new minister. Those pastors, some of them came from non-Adventist churches. Some were converted from African traditional culture or religion, and that very basic education. All you needed was to know a bit of English and have a standard 6 or standard 8 certificate. You have seen in Cliff's book that after Spionkop was moved to Helderberg, the curriculum was watered down so radically it meant nothing for development. And I can tell you now, we are now facing something extreme on the opposite side. Bethel shut down. People were sent to Helderberg. But what were they taught about us? Do you know that the GC Education Commission that came in 1984-85 discovered that the Helderberg Library did not have a single African author? What did that mean for those who went to Helderberg before? And how many African authors do they have? Do they read them? I've studied stuff that comes from Helderberg as assignments and other things. Africans are not used as sources of information. So the years have passed, but we have been standing at the same bus stop. The bus has changed the shape and so on, but we're still standing there waiting for the bus that gave us movement in 1950.
But so, where does the change start, Babnkos?
Yeah. I think what we need, I'm speaking on my feet now.
Yes.
I think on my feet. I think what we need is a local church to sit down, call some of its thinkers, announce the agenda, assign people tasks based on their competencies, bring documentation, implement it, see if, of course, there will be a committee, or like the church board could appoint, say, an academic development committee, or an educational development committee, that would then check if the material complies with contemporary needs in society and in the church, and whether it is not heretical and so on.
Yes.
By the way, the GC would love that. Let me tell you something. A lot of the things that come from the GC don't come from the GC.
Yeah, they come
from the North American division. They come from North America. Those guys are good at doing research and development. Yeah. They come from the North American division. They don't come from the GC.
So what comes from our side?
Your staff from the division, which is, I've read their text, and they don't mean anything for South Africa.
Is there any one thing which you could say maybe our SID, our division, has really contributed towards Adventism?
I don't think so.
So we're just consumers of...
We're consumers, literal consumers. And, it's good to be a consumer. We all consume something. But when what you consume has turned your condition to toxicity, then you have a problem. Then you have I've looked at 4 texts developed at the division. They don't speak about South Africa. They speak about a church, an ethereal situation. I think they're trying to avoid being compromised with politicians and so on. Of course, the other problem is that the division is dominated by people who come from north of us. No, I'm not talking about Zimbabwe, the region of Southern Africa, the SADC region.
Yes.
And they can't speak into a situation. Which is why this union only has one tertiary institution. Zimbabwe is going to be having its 4th campus not long from now. And yet they've got a poor economy. It's a serious contradiction. We've got a country that is one of the best in the world in terms of its economy and infrastructure, but we have a church that is archaic. Yeah. Which is why we're not about to impress some of our youth in universities, because we have not rethought. But I would like us to go back to what we need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because my main concern is legacy issues.
Yes.
I'm very much seized with this whole issue of legacy. Now, I'm wondering, what legacy are we leaving to our kids? Are they going to study the same thing we studied 60 years ago without any change? How is it helping them become better Christian within the context of the 21st century?
No, we are not. We're not doing that. You see it in the programs, in the sermons that pastors are preaching during this time. It's stuff I heard when I was a child. It's just coached in better English, academic English, sophisticated English. But it's still the same thing. It's not sending us anywhere. In one of these programs, I saw people talking about the Sabbath school offering and said, what's all this? What's all this? And the church at the conference level is acting like a field, highly dependent on the. I mean, you'll never see a pastor there who's not wearing a tie in the first place, because they're instructed from above to wear ties.
Is there still such instruction?
I don't want to go into that story.
Okay.
Telling you.
Okay. Now,
this is not a gossip show, isn't it?
no, it's not.
Fine.
Because it's factual. Yeah.
But I want to propose that a church like Calvin may lead here and be trailblazer. One of the things I can tell you is that if you release your first bullets, other people will start listening and say, let's release ours as well. There's a lot of brains in this union, lots of brains, but they're stuck in tradition, conservatism. Some are controlled by pastors who are afraid to back the system.
Because in your knowledge, has there been any, for example, historical text which has come out as a result of work done within a youth department in this conference or in this union?
No, not at all. Some of the young people who have come to my camps have met material that I developed which does not appear in the youth department. Because at one time I gave them this task to interview people. Yeah. It's just unfortunate some of our material is lost. Some of it went, I don't know how it got lost. Some of it had been recorded on tape and so on. But I don't see it any longer. But what we need, Mandla, is cool heads now to review. We know we come from a ruinous history. We can't be crying over spilled milk. What we need now is to stand up and fix what remains. Because at the end of time, God will want to know, what did you do then?
There's always this, within Adventism, this cry that when you start addressing some of the issues we're addressing, we are actually taking your eye off the main prize, which is the second coming.
What is the main
preaching
prize?
to Christ, you know.
And I'm not worried about the second coming of Jesus Christ. I want to live immortally. Because whether it comes or not, I want to be immortal. I want to live beyond his second coming. Because the second coming is a threat to other guys. The second coming is not just coming to save us only. It's also going to be leaving others in shambles. So we need to think beyond the second coming of Jesus. We need millennial thinkers now, post-Advent thinkers now. Where shall we be with this type of thing if we go to heaven? With it, I mean, we have a church that is not preparing people for heaven, preparing them for session, preparing for next Sabbath, and so on. We live for a week at a time. We're not living within the prophetic time scale that we announce in seminars and so on. So there is a bit of confusion here. So I suggest we need regional committees that will sit down, share notes, and recreate a relevant youth curriculum for South Africa.
Obviously, that's the start, because
Yeah.
obviously we need to look at other issues like Sabbath school and
That's
how,
right,
how we
yes.
generally conduct our programs.
Somebody once said, for instance, why always sending money overseas? When does the money come back this way? I didn't want to answer the missions reading. Some churches no longer read that type of thing.
Why is it also that I've been in the church, I was born in this church. I don't remember ever in the missionary report, ever hearing about stories from South Africa.
They come once in a while. I can tell you, I'm ready to tell you that the church does respond, but you see, these monies go to division coffers.
Okay.
It is the division that determines. This is Solusi, that goes to Bethel, that goes to Kangele, that goes. The churches are never consulted.
But surely, our union, obviously, financially and otherwise, surely is a major contributor to the division from a resources point of view. Shouldn't we therefore say that at least some of that should also help in terms of programs within this cash cow, so to speak?
Yeah, you need a lot of discussion to arrive at that point. We need a new churchmanship, which is not based on sessions and committees. Our church is very... I'm looking for a term that would relate to traditional, and we're stuck with this. We've venerated the structure more than mission of the mission of the structure. Yes, that's what I wanted to say. We want to save the church at the expense of mission, and yet it is mission that produces the church. The church does not produce mission. Mission produces the church. Here, the church has arrested mission.
But how do we break free from that, because that's what's holding progress across all fronts, whether it's, for example, in terms of our youth department curriculum, whether it's in terms of how we program generally as a church. What are the kind of things we need to do to actually break free from that? Especially bearing in mind, because the kind of mindset you have in terms of from a leadership point of view,
Yes.
and also from a churchman point of view.
Look, I think churches have a right within the Adventist economy, administrative economy, to innovate based on their needs. This discussion will take place in North America. I can tell you now. It's a typically colonial, African colonial discussion now. But North Americans don't deal with such questions. They've long gone through these things many years ago. You will remember Miss Brooks.
Yes.
She said to me once, why are you people 40 years old? 40 years backwards. I said, what is, no, she says, your agenda is here. We crossed those rivers 40 years ago in the United States. So the challenge has been in the training of our pastors, training of our elders, and departmental leaders. We need to stop worshiping the church of God and worship the God of the church. The church is a methodology, ultimately, that must respond to situations as they arise. It must not be stuck to one method all the time.
Yeah, but who will build a cat, as they say?
Well, you'll always have a Martin Luther. You'll always have a John Calvin. You'll always have a Mandela. You'll always have a...
So someone needs to be a
Someone needs to build a cat.
Yes.
And we need brave guys now. They don't need to be many. Let me tell you something that psychologists have studied. They say it only takes about 10 to 15% of a population to influence the rest of the. You know, when Hitler and his friends started the movement against the Tsars, they were a very small group. I once read the Mein Kampf, that book by Shira. Yeah. He says they said they were as such a small group that they decided to post 2 of their members along the streets, corners of streets in Berlin, I think, yeah. And they were playing on popular psychology. They would make noise. The first group would make noise. The initial group would make noise at the beginning of a street, and enough for people to join them and make the same noise. By the time the street was covered, there was a large crowd. They did not know that these people were actually small in number. And that's what led to Hitler becoming the Führer of Germany. So you don't need majorities. In the majority, there are those who want to follow what the few are telling them. It's in politics as well. Yeah, politics as well. So we don't need to fear. All we need is to get a core of people who are prepared to break the shell. To have a new baby.
Okay, in the context of, for example, the youth department, let's talk about that because that is something which is easier to deal with. And for example, I mean, if you look at the curriculum of master guide, the guide, etc., what would be the quick wins?
The quick wins would be, in a local church, you introduce your own church history.
But then they will not invest you.
The history of Calvin.
But then you will not be invested.
Not invested, yeah.
Because remember, the people, the gatekeepers at a regional and even at a conference level will tell you, no, but you have not covered what we prescribe.
Let me tell you something. I've talked to guys at the General Conference Youth Department many times. They are not as rigid as our local people, which is why America is feeding us its history. And we're not feeding anybody our history because we've not exploited it. We've not explored it. It's an insult. Why should it be wrong? For instance, I've got an assignment paper here from a guy in KZN. Oh, I don't have it here. It could be somewhere else.
Mike,
but I brought it here.
The Pearson one.
No, that's not the one.
Okay.
The guys in KZN, they are required to do a historical study of their local congregations and tell where the congregation came from. But they've not been taught the methodology. They've not been taught how to interview people. They've not been taught how to document information. You see? Prescriptions without capacitating the researcher will not work. Will not work. And recently, teachers in one of our schools phoned me and said, we've been asked to research the histories of our conferences. I said, by whom? Helderberg at Department of Education. And then they sent me to me, no, we were told that you have a lot of material on this. I said, I sell the material because I was paid to do this thing. I can't waste the material on people who do not fund the project. They disappeared. Adventists, blacks want free information. If you sell it, somebody phoned me and said, why are you selling church stuff? I said to him, why don't you have it? If it's church stuff, well, then you must have it too. There is an unintellectual view of how the church should operate here.
But how then do you break free, especially, for example, even if, let's say you have a great local church which decides to do all the steps which you are actually prescribing, but then how do you break through I don't know, it's not called what's
these protocols?
Well, yeah, what is it? It's not the regional. What do we call them
Structure.
Here? District. Because remember, the district is supposed to be recommending you so that you can be invested. How do you break through when, for example, you find that the district guys are still existing 60 years ago? They are not prepared to move. They are not prepared to shift. They are looking at the manual as they have it as though it's the Bible. And they will not move an inch because that's the only thing they know. Once you move them, you actually make them irrelevant. But they need this because it's what gives them relevance within the church. So if you move, I don't know if you read the book, Who Moved My Cheese?
Yes,
so if you move the cheese, you're actually causing chaos.
Let me tell you something about districts. They only exist in Southern Africa. They don't exist
I know.
anywhere else.
They're not
They
part
were
of
created for blacks to be controlled by missionaries. Districts don't exist in a
They are not part of our structure, yes, absolutely.
Which is why a district is not a legal structure.
Yes.
Which is why we landed in trouble with the farm, because we don't have the legal
To hold.
means to own property.
Yes.
Districts must disappear.
No,
But how do we move forward?
Yes.
How do we move forward? I think you can use your status as a church. You are a legal body. Write to the General Conference, tell them this is what you are doing. The guys there are more flexible than your guys in this country.
So you think they'll come and do the investment?
No, they might not, but give them a motivational statement
Okay.
and tell them the analysis, the contextual analysis you have done, and what you think out of that analysis you can give birth to as a local church. I mean, it's silly that all the doctorates we have in the church in this country, black, none of them has written a historical text about us. They write about things, strange things. None does history. So how are we going to teach denominational history in the absence of historians in the black church? That's the issue. People want jobs in an organization as long as it is convenient to work, but they don't want to innovate. They don't want to innovate because innovation is like kicking against the pricks. Some of us are ready to take a little banning and to bleed a little because I peep a lot into people. What are people doing? Why is this being done? The ultimate result of the situation I'm explaining here, Mandla, before we go back to what we need to do again, is that some of our youth, members of the youth department, are fakes. I've been to camp meetings where pathfinders wore the uniforms they did not own, where kids were given sashes with epaulets that they did not pass. It's a scandalous thing. Very scandalous. You can't do that. I can't wear a police uniform now. I'll be arrested for impersonification, impersonating the police. I might even be injured by people who don't like the police. So there's a lot of laxity in the youth department. There are also fakes, unfortunately. Counterfeit leaders. The program is also not reviewed periodically.
Now, which talks about, for example, for me, the digitization of the program itself.
Yes, we have to indigenize it, yes. I mean, how many of us are tying knots?
Well, again.
How many shoes have laces?
Yeah.
Where do you tie knots? Some of these things don't belong to the life we live now.
But Bongos, how do you expect me, who is vested in this matter, because that's all I did and that's all I know, to change?
Well, let me tell you something, Mandla. You know what happens when a bull it does not want to move out of the way? You whip it and it does not move. Sometimes we have to retire it. Some of these youth leaders who are no longer young must retire. You must be told your time is over.
Reminds me of a ZANU-PF youth leader. I was watching the television, and the youth leader is about 65 years old.
That's an insult. That's an insult. That's an insult.
But I mean, this is really true for our church.
We're facing that even in the church. I mean, we have got elders. I told you the story of Pastor Guben.
No.
Pastor Guben was transferred to KZN some years before he retired. He found an elder who had been leading the church for 31 years. He even had a special seat in this church. And he removed him from, the dominant influence, the dominant committee to remove him from office. His sons did not come to church. One day he was walking in the village and they landed on him with sticks. Why are you removing our father from his position? And he slept in hospital for several weeks. We need, well, let me say this, Mandla, all trailblazers bleed. We need Martin Luther's now, John Calvin's now. We need people who are going to say, we want to give birth to a new church now and be ready to be bruised by those who want to stick to the lacha.
Now, Bongos, I think this is the time where we actually should start saying, as part of what we have done here is really to look and critique, for example, some of the programs which we have, for example, the Master Guide, etc., and we've identified some of those shortcomings. But someone needs to step up to actually plug that gap. Someone needs to come and say, hey, I am willing to be part of the group, whether we're looking at the historical text. Someone has to step up. So, which means, therefore, we need to create some form of a forum for people to be able to actually join this and say, hey, I'd like to do A, I'd like to do B, I'd like to do C.
Let me suggest one simple way in which we could do it. Send a paper around, ask for input. What would you have wished the youth department to have taught you? What did you wish the department to teach your child now? Out of all that input, you can then create a relevant and popularly affirmed curriculum. That's one way of doing it. Very simple.
Just one thing, because do we have a research department at the conference level?
No, we don't. All the departments are implementing departments, compliance departments.
Do we have a resource center, for example, within?
We don't. We don't. Let me tell you something. I've been researching the history of this church. I was asked by people who went to a union committee 4 years ago to prepare a history of the TOC. The General Conference is engaging in a major publishing project now. They're developing an encyclopedia of Adventism globally. It's going to take years. So I was one of those who were asked to write a history of this conference. I've pulled out of the project because I discovered through gossip that the project had been removed from me because I would say things that people would not like. I'm telling you. My text, some of the things that I discovered will go into the text we shall be publishing from Kelvin not long from now. This is the issue we are facing in the church. People go into committees, they assassinate people, thinking that they'll be subjected to immunity. One of the most dangerous things in this church is this committee system. It can be very harmful to people's egos.
You know, I'm reminded of a Kiswahili saying which says that until the lions have historians,
Yes.
the hunter will always be the hero.
Yeah.
And I think this is our situation here. We do not have any historians, so someone will always tell our tale. Even within that project you're talking about, the GC, it will not be our story.
No, it will not be.
Someone will be telling that story on our behalf.
What we need now, Mandla, is autonomous thinkers in the church, not dependent members. We need autonomous thinkers now. We need autonomous. Mostly because our kids who have gone to tertiary education are slipping through our fingers. I'm at VETS quite often because there's a project I'm doing there with one of the librarians. Adventist youth there tell me, some, have come to my home, tell me, Baba Tina, we can no longer stand this thing. Many of our tertiary youth,
we don't have any content to actually keep them energized.
Some of them sit in their homes in groups and drink. In Soweto, it's happening, I've been told. I can't release names now. But there's a lot of drinking in the some of the drinkers are young people. Because they say, what's this thing for? It is not for us. We don't understand this thing. It's not about us. It's not for us. What legacy are we passing to our kids? Nothing at all. Gather any type of youth similar to the group you have here. They'll tell you things you did not expect. Because I've come to realize that body size has nothing to do with mindset. In the past, we thought that the smaller you are, the duller you are, the less educated you are. Today, you look at a girl and she tells you she's doing a PhD, and you say, what? You? So small. And you can't undermine that. You can't undermine that. That's why the church here needs to wake up to the fact that we're now in the 21st century, not the 20th century. Yeah, some of the things we're doing here belong to the 50s and 40s. Really. I don't recognize the missions reading, for instance. We have needs here. When is this thing going? Where is the money coming here? When is the money coming here?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Guys, we are about to wrap up our session, this part of our story. We've really been going through just to go back in time to find out where you come from, so that maybe when we can learn from some of the mistakes which you've done in the past, and maybe also just to pick some interest on some of us, some of you out there who may be interested to know more, not only to know more, but to do more because of what you now know. You see, they say knowledge is power. Once you know, then you begin to question things, and then you also start wanting to do something differently. And we hope that this exercise is just not a talk shop, but it's an exercise really to kickstart a movement of people who are seriously concerned about who they are and where they stand within the Adventist system, so that they are not actually just told by someone else who they are, but they know from themselves who they are. Because I don't know if you want to have some closing remarks.
I do want to have some closing remarks. Esi, in Pumalanga, you have seen and heard what we are discussing here today. The rest of us, please, let's take time, pray for this church. This is the right church. It may be doing wrong things now and then, but we are not deviating you from your mission as an Adventist. All we are calling for is a new church for a new age. Thank you.
Because in closing, I'm a storyteller. I love stories. And I learn a lot from stories.
Yes.
You know, there's a story is told of this penguin, a father penguin and the son. They're walking on an iceberg. It's obviously penguin-like cold environment. And as they're walking there, the son penguin asked the father, Baba, father, am I a penguin? The father looks at the young man and says, of course you're a penguin. You're my son. And they continue walking on this iceberg. The son asks again, but daddy, are you really sure I'm a penguin? The father says, son, I'm a penguin, I'm your father. Your mother is a penguin, she's your mother. That makes you a penguin. The young penguin says, okay. And they continue walking. For the third time, the son says, daddy, really, are you sure I'm a penguin? The father says, come on. I'm your father, your mother, your brothers and sisters are all penguins. Of course, that makes you a penguin. And then the father says, but why do you keep asking the same question? And the boy says, because, father, I'm feeling really cold. Now, you need to understand this. As a penguin, it needs to be a comfortable eating environment. So the cold weather should be something which is actually
alien.
Which is something which is actually part of it. But it was feeling cold. And this is what I sense is a lot with a lot of Adventists. A lot of us are Adventists because people say we are, but we really don't know what it is being an Adventist. It's not something, it's something we are told, but it's not who we are. And we have this cognitive dissonance of what I'm supposed to be, but what I'm really feeling. And which is causing this schism, which makes us ineffectual as Christians. It makes us ineffectual as people. And we can't even do anything of value to this movement. Because it's really what we are told we are, but it's not really who we are. We hope that this has been one of those sessions to start the process where you actually focus on finding out who you are. Because maybe when you know who you are, you will then know where you need to go and what exactly you need to do to improve the lot of those around you. This is the final episode in this series. We will hopefully come back soon. We will be announcing later. We'll come back with something else. But in the meantime, we'd like to hear your input. We'd like to hear, what did you think? Yes. What did you learn? Where do you think we should focus? What do you think are the key challenges? How do we deal with those challenges? Please write to us. You know, yes. We have Kelvin on Athol, our story at Kelvin on Athol. I'm sure the guys will say, will actually publish our communication details there. Please write to us. Tell us your experiences. Tell us what you'd like to see. Tell us where we should actually, where it's actually itchy so we can scratch with our next series. Until then, Bamgosi, your final words?
Thank you very much. I have relished the moment to be part of this program and to excite those who love the story. I know not all of us are historically oriented, but I think we've been conversational enough for the story to create interest in the minds of people. I know we've aroused interest. Phone us or email us. My number is 076-681-9039. 076-681-9039. I'm ready to talk to you. We may even favor you with something to read. And I think Mandla in a future edition of the program will be advertising books as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We will have that session where we'll do books so that you can see what kind of books are available out there. But remember, this is not the end, but it's the beginning. Thank you very much.
Not yet too Not yet too